Welcome in, everybody. Back-to-back Dream Streams, except we're the only show today. Apologies for the delay. Got the ranks worked out now. Other tech issues resolved, and I'm here with two of my good friends. First, back from hiding from me, ducking my lunch bets,
Here we go.
a Bucks loss. My normal Dream Stream co-host, Joe Metz. How you doing, Joe?
Good. I mean, I go, I leave town for a wedding, come back to all this slander, to a Bucks loss. I'm just never going anywhere again because apparently I would have owed you lunch. So I gotta keep my perfect record intact. So I'm gonna be very selective with what I'm betting.
Yeah, we'll see if we can't find another bet to throw up there today. And then my Dream Stream back-to-back partner here, the optimizer extraordinaire, Kyle Murray. How you doing, Kyle?
I'm doing good, yeah. Coming off of another night with you last night. I had a pretty good night last night, and I got caught up by some of the Clippers and Thunder game. That was a wild game there, but excited for this 5-gamer here.
Yeah, man, I think it's a nice little Tuesday slate for us. The games are pretty spread out throughout the night, so about 50 minutes until lock here, we will just go game by game, and we'll open up with a little Dream Stream. Maybe you guys can get a lunch bet going. Milwaukee at Detroit. And we'll start with the home team, the Detroit Pistons, because some big news coming through in Dwayne Casey's media availability pregame that Cade Cunningham, according to – I would have to scroll up and get the direct quote, but essentially Cade Cunningham may not have a minutes limit tonight. And at 3-6 on DraftKings, 1-5, I believe, on Superdraft. I think less of a priority maybe at 5K, but still in play if he's going to play, upper 20s, maybe crack that 30-minute mark on Fanduel. I think that's kind of everybody's priority from this Detroit team today. So, Kyle, is that kind of a lock and load for you, and where else are you looking for your team?
Yeah, I don't know about a lock and load. I mean, I do think it's a really good value play on DraftKings. I think if the public gets really overweight on Cade Cunningham here, I mean, sure, we're hoping for around that 30-minute mark. And if he gets there, I think it's obviously a fantastic play. But I wouldn't be surprised if this game ends up with Cade Cunningham playing, 22 minutes, or 23 minutes. I don't think that would be like the most unworldly outcome there. I do think the minutes right now that I have is about 27 and a half, 28 minutes is where I'm projected. If he gets 30, I think it's a really strong play. I don't think you need to play him on FanDuel. He had a 22% usage rate in game one, so I think that'll only go up. And I believe it was, 7 rebounds. So, I mean, I think he's going to consist of a significant threat in other areas of production as well. So I do think he's going to end up being a pretty good fantasy producer. Yeah, I think he's a very strong play. It makes a ton of sense on DraftKings. I'm running some updates here now to see where his ownership comes in at. As of now, I have him at about 14%, which I don't think is too bad. I'm okay with that number. But that's also on FanDuel. Let me check on DraftKings. I'll check on DraftKings, but overall, prefer him on DraftKings. Think he's fine on FanDuel. DraftKings, I had him at 38%. So that's a big number, but he's also projecting as one of the better value plays of the slate. So that's but I mean, when you consider the top value being super popular on a slate like this, yesterday was Andre Drummond, and we kind of all knew that he was a smash, and there was not really a ton of ways that went wrong. I think it's a lot different today. So if he's going to see similar kind of ownership, I think maybe we kind of approach a little bit more caution than how we approached Drummond yesterday.
Joe, any differences for you in terms of attacking Cade Cunningham and the Pistons?
No, I think he's obviously a stronger play on DraftKings, ownership aside, but I actually think if there is no limit, if he does get 27 to 30 minutes, I think 5K can be a very reasonable price on FanDuel. And I think there's an opportunity for some leverage there because he won't be as popular. Mm-hmm. I mean, he shot 1 of 8 last game. I don't expect that type of efficiency to be an issue going forward, especially with how effective we saw him be in preseason and summer league. So I'm okay with Cade on both sides tonight.
Yeah, it makes sense to me. And Joe, we'll stick with you to talk about your Bucks, who remain without, I believe, the majority of their starting lineup. Yeah. 3 or 4 guys, Brook Lopez, Drew Holiday, Chris Middleton, and I guess you can add in Dante DiVincenzo, even though he's still not cleared. Those 4 of the 5 regular starters for the Bucks. They will return Semi Ojeleye from his rest day. Giannis, we can talk about him, some of these ancillary pieces, but I got a bone to pick with my guy, Bud.
Okay, here we go.
Apparently 15 minutes up in your neck of the woods means 20. I didn't know they did different math or some sort of different number system in Wisconsin, but now I know. So, Joe, where are you looking at with your Bucks tonight?
So Bobby Portis is my number one play on the Bucks, and that doesn't mean I'm not high on Giannis. I think there is, it's a very off chance, but I think there is I'm going to use your vernacular, a non-zero chance that Giannis doesn't play tonight. I'm not trying to freak anyone out. I'm not trying to throw this slate sideways, but like look at Philly last night. This is a perfect example. Look at Philly last night. Embiid sitting out. Tobias Harris, obviously with COVID, a little different, but like Embiid could have played that game without a doubt. But they just don't, seventh game of the regular season. They don't necessarily need him. This could be a game the Bucks are like, you know what? We don't play again until Friday. Let's just give our guys some rest. I don't think that's going to happen, but I think we need to be prepared just in case it does. But Portis is my number one play. Giannis, assuming active, is my favorite spend up. But outside of them, there's going to be a lot of ownership surrounding whether it's Grayson Allen, Pat Connaughton, George Hill. I think there'll be a little Jordan Nwora. If I had to rank those four, I'd probably rank them George Hill, Grayson Allen, Pat Connaughton, Jordan Nwora. My only concern, and you can throw Thanasis in there too. At 3-1. If he starts, I think he's a phenomenal value. I think Portis' uptick in minutes will hurt Sandro Mamukelashvili. There it is, Zach. And Jordan Nwora incrementally more than they'll hurt Thanasis because they throw Thanasis at the 3 quite a bit, especially Middleton out. So, I know some people in Discord earlier were talking that Portis' uptick in minutes will directly impact Thanasis. I don't think that's true. I think it will incrementally, but I don't think it's a direct one-for-one.
I think the bigger hit on Thanasis is going to come from Semi Ojeleye coming back, even though he's probably only going to get between like 10 and 14 minutes. I think that's a bigger worry for me personally. But Kyle, what are you looking for on that? Like, are you as heavy on Bobby Portis as Joe? I think all three of us are probably in agreement that Giannis, if he's active, is a fantastic play tonight.
Giannis would be my top spend up, and it's not really that difficult to get to him either. I think I will say, Joe, you're trying to throw us into a scramble here with that potential
I'm not.
assumption. I've already updated the projections. I've ruled Giannis out. He's out of the projections. Kidding. But I do think that is something that I kind of thought about earlier. But I feel like we would know by now, or at least I hope we would know by now. But other than that, like I do like Bobby Portis as well. I actually like him more on Fanduel, 4,700 over there, just a bit in terms of price comparison to other guys in that slate. I think he makes a lot more sense. And on Fanduel, you don't have as many guys at like the bottom tier that jump out, like Cade Cunningham or even Thanasis at 3,100 on DraftKings. Like he's a fine punt as well. He's getting some ownership, which I don't love, but totally fine. I like Grayson Allen a pretty good amount as well. I think he's one of those value guys that has a pretty nice ceiling. I have him at about 30 minutes, but pretty much I think you can make a case for several of these guys. So I don't want to go down the list, but basically other than Robinson, Hood, Ojeleye, and Mamu, I'm not even going to try out the last name. I think I think you can make a significant case for the rest of the team, right? Like they all project as pretty solid value. They're all either at or under 5K on both sites. Pat Connaughton's a little bit overpriced on FanDuel where he's 5K. You can just play the other guys there for a little bit cheaper, which I would just rather do. But then again, you also have him at a fraction of the ownership. But I'm not really too concerned about anyone on FanDuel getting too popular. The only guys on DraftKings I'm worried about getting too popular are Thanasis and then George Hill. George Hill I've had about 25% projected ownership. So now you're talking basically him versus Cade Cunningham. I would rather, if I'm going to be playing a chalky punt guard, I'd rather just play Cade. I think his ceiling is much higher.
Yeah, that makes total sense to me. So I guess we can go ahead and move on. If we do get some crazy Giannis news, obviously we will circle back around. And we'll go to Miami and Dallas. I believe this is the first game of the TNT doubleheader tonight. Again, those TNT guys on Tuesdays now, so as not to compete with Thursday night football, which I like as somebody who wants to tune into the Tuesday or Thursday night game as well. But we can start with this Dallas side, and we've already got obviously some news throughout the day and their starting lineup. Dallas will be without Kristaps Porzingis once again. Trey Burke also sitting out. He went into the protocols, and then Maxi Kleber will be out 7 to 10 days. So the Mavs making a change to their starting lineup. Jalen Brunson will start. I don't really know if you say he's going to start at the 1 or the 2 because Luka's out there as well. But Brunson, Doncic, Tim Hardaway Jr., Dorian Finney-Smith, and Dwight Powell getting another start at the 5. And again, with Kleber going out last game, we saw a bunch of extra minutes for Dwight Powell. We saw Willie Cauley-Stein get increased minutes. We saw Frank Ntilikina get up to almost 20 minutes in that last game. So, Kyle, where are you starting with this Dallas team?
I do think Powell is probably the guy I'm going to play the most on DraftKings. On Fanduel, I do think I like Brunson a bit more. But I think they're both fine. I just think it's easier to play him on Fanduel, with him being point guard. And then on DraftKings, Dwight Powell is only center eligible, but obviously with the utility spot, it does make it a bit easier. But on Fanduel, he does have power forward eligibility. Another one of those guys that for some reason gets power forward eligibility on FanDuel. But I think Powell's a strong play. I mean, he's always been a pretty solid per-minute producer over the course of the last year and a half, about 0.9 points per minute there. So I think he's totally fine. 4K on DraftKings. I mean, we've talked about 2 games. We're already talking about all these strong value plays. Mm-hmm. So I do think it's possible to get to both Giannis and Luka. If I had to choose one, I definitely prefer Giannis. Like I have Giannis almost 10 points higher than Luka tonight. So I definitely do. I think it's a pretty significant difference for me.
Yeah, man, I would choose Giannis over Luka 10 times out of 10 tonight. And that's not discounting the ceiling that Luka brings every time he steps on the floor. I just think the usage is going to be so massive with all those other guys out tonight. And again, like playing the Pistons, crazy things have to happen. And they have, obviously, to have the Bucks only like 5.5-point favorites against this Detroit team. So that being a close game, I'm all about Giannis over Luka tonight. But Joe, I think I know what your answer is, but how are you breaking down Giannis and Luka at the top and then the rest of these Mavs?
So Giannis is my clear-cut favorite on both sites. I do think Luka's a stronger play on FanDuel when he's a bit cheaper. He's only 10-4. Obviously, you lose the double-double and triple-double bonuses, but you obviously gain the stock bonuses with potential blocks and steals. Brunson, like Kyle, is my favorite play from this team on FanDuel. It's Dwight Powell on DraftKings. I think outside, I have no interest in Tim Hardaway Jr. My concern with Luka right now, my big decision right now is basically, do I want to play Giannis and Luka and just value from there on out, or do I want to play Giannis, find a secondary stud like a Donovan Mitchell, who I think is in a great spot tonight, a Rudy Gobert, a Anthony Davis, who I don't think anyone is talking about enough, and then kind of even out from there. I think that if people pay up for more than one player, it's going to be Giannis and Luka. I don't think we're going to see ownership around these Lakers guys. I don't think you're going to see it around Donovan Mitchell, De'Aaron Fox, Rudy Gobert, these guys, which kind of deters me from Luka a little bit. And like Miami is one of those matchups where I don't think you can ever like fully stop Luka, but they can do enough to get the ball out of his hands enough where they could disrupt his ceiling. And that worries me a little bit on a 5-game slate, especially when he's not projecting to be, overwhelming chalk. So if you get him at 20% or less, if he doesn't do anything, then you're really screwed. Where if he's chalk and you played him and he doesn't do anything, then you're not necessarily behind the 8 ball.
Yeah, I mean, and this Miami team, obviously, small sample size here earlier in the season, but I believe their margin of victory is like just over 17 points so far this season.
The spread confuses me.
Yeah. So we did get a question here. There is a decent-sized showdown slate for Miami and Dallas over here on DraftKings. So T-Panthers was asking who would be our favorite captain. I was checking out the salaries a little bit. I think I'm sticking with all the value, especially from this Dallas side in this game. I'm probably going to stick with Bam, Jimmy, or Luka. And you can build a pretty massive showdown lineup if you slide Bam into that captain spot. But I think I would rank them because of that. Bam 1, Luka 2, and Jimmy 3 for me on that showdown. So, yeah, there you go, T-Panther, a little showdown action mid-show for you. So let's flip to this Miami side because we get Bam back from the knee bruise, and he's, coming off a massive game against Charlotte, and I don't think this Dallas front court is scaring us at all either. So, Joe, he's at 7.5. Jimmy Butler's priced up at 9.1. Kyle Lowry, who's averaging all of 8 points a game, still up at 7.1K. So where are you looking at the top here with the Heat?
With the Heat, my preference here is Bam. I don't think, even with Kristaps in, I don't think that would change anything. Like, I don't think anyone can contain Bam in this Dallas front court, like, whatsoever. So he's my preference, especially with price factored in and ownership, because I don't think anyone on this Heat team is going to be popular whatsoever. but Bam especially because of how power forward and center are loaded with value. Bam's my number one choice. I don't mind Jimmy. I get a little hesitant when he's above 9K. He's 10K on FanDuel, especially with Bam back. A little hesitant. I don't hate Kyle Lowry for 5.9 on FanDuel, but again, he has not been playing well where I'd almost rather just opt for Tyler Hero. But outside of those guys, I'm really not considering anyone on this Heat team.
Kyle, any differences for you in attacking the Miami Heat?
No, I mean, FanDuel definitely hates me. They keep doing this with guy. Last year, if you're a returning sub, you know that last year it was Buddy Hield. He was always like 5-4 on FanDuel, and they made me play him every single night. And that's what it is for Kyle Lowry here. I don't ever really like paying Kyle Lowry, but if he's going to play sometimes mid-30s minutes and be under 6K on FanDuel, he projects as a pretty solid play. He's getting popular, 26%. Last slate, he was 5,900, and he didn't really get that chalky, so I do think he was a better play that slate than this slate where it does seem like people are getting to him more. But I agree. I think Bam would be my top option on DraftKings as well. On FanDuel, unfortunately, I do think it would be Kyle Lowry, which I hate to say just because of the price. But I mean, he does bring a pretty nice value relief. But overall, I would rank them Bam, Lowry on FanDuel, and then Jimmy Butler. I do think Jimmy Butler does still have upside even at the price on both sides, honestly. Like it's a triple-double threat every single night. He's going to play a ton of minutes, and he definitely has those massive ceiling games in him. So now he's up to a point on some sites, FanDuel specifically, where he's kind of priced near Luka and even up there about 1,300 off of Giannis. But I think you can make the case for playing him at super low ownership, but it's not something that I'm going to be doing a ton tonight.
Any love for either of you guys on, Tyler Hero, 6.9 on DK? He's 1.5x on Superdraft, which I think is a nice little multiplier. And then Duncan Robinson hasn't really had that big game yet, where he goes for 7 or 8 threes. He's down to 4.4K on DraftKings, so I have some interest there. Joe, what do you think about the mid-range for Miami?
What Kyle described being sucked into Kyle Lowry is how I am with Duncan Robinson on DraftKings. It's just really hard for me with how their usage is shaking out. Like, he needs to make his threes in order to pay off. I don't even know if he gets enough volume to really get you there because of the other value on this slate. Like, you have other value that, things go well, like Kate Cunningham, for example, Dwight Powell, Javel Mcgee. Like, these guys have more than 10x upside. I don't think Duncan Robinson has that. I would, at the same position, I would opt for someone like a Josh Hart for $500 more over Duncan Robinson. I wouldn't even think twice about it. So I think Duncan Robinson is probably one of my fades in the value range. I do understand the appeal of playing him, though.
Yeah, absolutely. And man, I'm glad to have you guys with me because as I've transitioned away from not playing DFS, and the ranks just have DK and Superdraft on them, less time for me to spend on FanDuel. And now that I'm looking at this point guard pricing, holy cow, value galore. You talked about Kyle Lowry at 5.9, but KPJ, Jalen Green right there, Conley, Cunningham, Jalen Brunson 4.6. Oh, I wish I was playing. Anyways, boys, anything else on this Miami-Dallas game? Or are we good to move on?
There's just the one thing I wanted to point out is Hero is getting fairly popular on FanDuel, which I don't love that. Like, he's the kind of guy that I think when he does get super popular, you can kind of make the case for fading. It's only 15% projected ownership, so it's not anything crazy. But I would say just watch that number. I'm gonna run an update here in about probably 5 or 10 minutes. So if it's like anything higher than that, I mean, he's a very streaky scorer, so he can go off at this price tag. But also if he's going to be up here projecting 25 or probably won't get to 30, but 25%, that's a big number for a guy who can, very easily dud if his shot's not on.
Yeah, absolutely. I see Nickeil Alexander-Walker $300 cheaper there. And, man, this multi-position eligibility on FanDuel is still throwing me off. So I'm going to leave the majority of the FanDuel stuff to you two gentlemen. We'll move on to Sacramento, going into Utah to play in Salt Lake City. In the elevation, these two teams have already met about a week and a half ago, earlier this season, back on the 22nd, and the Jazz came out with a 110-101 victory. We'll start with the home team, the Jazz here. Always continuity in Utah, so it's kind of a nice team to have on a slate. Nice, easy breakdown usually. Even if somebody's out, we know what's going to happen usually. in Utah, and Donovan Mitchell, still sub 9K on DraftKings, still hasn't had that big blow up game. But I kind of think this is where, I mean, if you're going to target any team, the Kangs are one of the better teams to do it if you're going to have a get right game. So, Kyle, is this where you're targeting Donovan Mitchell, or are you kind of looking at some of the other options here?
Yeah, Donovan Mitchell is one of my favorite plays on the slate on FanDuel. He is going to be popular because he's only 8K, but like that's a price. Like Donovan Mitchell can easily be a 9K player on FanDuel, so I'm okay with eating chalk when I do think the player is just flat out underpriced. So I do like that price a lot. I also like Rudy Gobert, and not usually someone that gets overly excited to play Rudy Gobert, but he's been very good this year. Looks like he is kind of turning a new leaf in terms of getting more involved in the game on both ends. So Rudy Gobert, 8-2 on FanDuel, 8,100 on DraftKings. I think he's a good play on both sites. I do like Javel again tonight, so if that's going to be blocking Gobert out, that's potentially something that could be the reason why I don't get to as much Gobert. I think there are plenty, I shouldn't say plenty, but a handful of good center options. But Donovan Mitchell is definitely my priority from this game. Mike Conley is also projecting as a nice value. So if I don't have Donovan Mitchell, I'll probably up my interest in Mike Conley on FanDuel, where he's only 5,500. DraftKings, I think he's fine at 6K, but I do prefer him on FanDuel. And then that's pretty much it for the slate for Utah, except for Bogdanovich on DraftKings, 5,100. That price isn't too bad. I can see myself getting him. But other than that, not a ton of interest in anybody other than Gobert and Mitchell.
Yeah, and Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert both at nice multipliers on Superdraft, 1.2 for Donovan Mitchell, 1.25x for Rudy Gobert. Joe, any other takes on Utah? You may be looking at somebody like a Joe Ingles or a Bojan Bogdanovic, or are you kind of sticking to the top?
I'm kind of sticking to the top with Donovan Mitchell on FanDuel. I do like Rudy Gobert quite a bit. My only issue right now is you look at power forward or center specifically. I am currently trying to get 3 of Giannis, or 4 of 5 between Giannis, Portis, Dwight Powell, Anthony Davis, and Javel Mcgee. I can't prioritize Rudy Gobert over those guys on a per minute production, especially with so much interest in Donovan Mitchell. So I'm okay just riding Mitchell and then moving on from Utah.
Okay, we did just get news. Nothing crazy coming out of Milwaukee, or I should say coming out of Detroit from Milwaukee. Giannis listed available to play. We can swing over to the Sacramento side, and it's kind of interesting for me, fellas, on DraftKings, because when I was ranking these guys earlier, I have a lot of, I guess not a lot of interest, but I have interest in a lot of these players. I think a lot of them are priced pretty advantageously. It's just, which one are you going to go in on tonight and hope that that's the guy that produces well on the Kings? Obviously, De'Aaron Fox really hasn't, he hasn't shot the ball well. 37, 17, 61 splits. I guess not shooting the ball well is maybe being a little bit too nice in terms of his start to the season. So he's down at 8.6. Harrison Barnes been one of the most consistent players in daily fantasy, sitting at 7.4K on DraftKings. Then Rashaan Holmes, who fouled out the last time these two teams met back on the 22nd. But in those 18 minutes, 29 DraftKings points for Rashaan Holmes. So, Joe, take me through how you're breaking down the Kings tonight.
I like De'Aaron Fox a lot here. I think, we streamed with Alex the last time these two teams played, and one note that he made, like, these teams are polar opposite in terms of style of play. Obviously, Utah, a very, very slow-paced half-court team. Sacramento, the complete opposite. If Sacramento wants to stay in the game and wants to win or succeed, they need to push the pace, and De'Aaron Fox is going to be the one driving that force. So if he is successful in that and he controls the tempo of the game, he's going to thrive. So I think he's a fine pivot off of Donovan Mitchell. Just depends if that's how you're scripting the game. Rashaan Holmes is still cheap. It's a tough matchup for him, don't get me wrong, but I also think the 18 minutes with foul trouble is a bit of an outlier. I like him in the betting market, though, more than I do the DFS market today.
That makes sense. Kyle, how are you looking at the top of Sacramento here? Obviously a tough matchup.
Yeah, so, the way I see De'Aaron Fox is I have him at about 21% projected ownership on FanDuel right now. I think that number, if we didn't have his, poor shooting or, honestly just the poor play overall to start the year, if he would be 7,700 in any matchup, I think he would be significant chalk. So I do think you're at a place where, sure, he's not going to be under-owned, but I do think he is probably going to be lower owned than he should be at just 7,700. Like, this is kind of, Zach, you and I talked about this yesterday, where in NBA DFS early on in the year, you can look for these regression type plays where players are probably going to play better than they've been, and that's De'Aaron Fox. And then there's players that are probably going to not play as good as they've been because they've been playing unreal, and that's kind of Harrison Barnes. So I'm not going to play Harrison Barnes over De'Aaron Fox at the same price. If they're the same price, that goes to show that De'Aaron Fox is underpriced. And I know Harrison Barnes has been very good this year, so no slight on him, but that's just my point, that De'Aaron Fox is too cheap. Joe made the point that Alex made last week where this should be a spot where they're going to need De'Aaron Fox to be able to push the ball. And it also goes to show that this game entire is kind of underpriced in my opinion, because Utah, a lot of these players are priced where they're going to be based on their team's expectations, their pace, which is typically going to be very slow. They're going to be kind of in a pace up spot here against the Kings, which I do like. So De'Aaron Fox is definitely my priority. I think Davion Mitchell is a pretty solid value, not projecting as like an amazing option for me, but definitely a lower owned option that I think could be contrarian here. And we've seen games where he's in there and he's closing at times and getting mid-30s, or sorry, not mid-30s, but near 30 minutes. So I do think Davion Mitchell makes some sense as a value player here. The guy who I watched him in the tournament last year with Baylor, I could have swore he was related to Donovan Mitchell. D. Mitchell, number 45, can't convince me otherwise. So maybe he has a little bit of and he did say that he wears 45, or he wore 45 in college because of Donovan Mitchell. So, hey, maybe he wants to show out there for his non-relative.
Yeah, I guess so. Maybe the second time these guys meet, I guess he's probably hoping for a better outcome than the first time around when he went 1 for 8. But I'm glad you brought him up, because I think he's a pretty strong value that is going to go somewhat overlooked tonight, even on this 5-game slate. So, Joe, Davion Mitchell love, or maybe like Tyrese Halliburton, Buddy Hield. All these Kings main rotation guys play big minutes.
Buddy Hield is cheap, and that's my appeal to him. I think the issue with Buddy Hield, coming into the year, my mind was, okay, there's no Bogdanovich. He should be clear for more minutes, more usage. This usage is just funneled to Davion Mitchell. It's funneled to De'Aaron Fox and not Buddy Hield. But we've also seen the ceiling that Buddy Hield does have, and it's strictly a GPP play because of the floor, but no one's going to play him. Especially against Utah. But if there's an area to attack Utah in the half court, it's beyond the arc, and that's Buddy Hield camps beyond the arc. So I think that's Buddy Hield is a fine play. So he would be my choice between him, Halliburton, or Davion Mitchell.
Yeah, I think my favorite guy over on Superdraft going to be Rashaan Holmes at 1.35x. But with some of the other center options over there, and obviously a tough matchup, he wouldn't be my priority at center. Obviously, only one center spot over there on Superdraft. So anything else for you guys in this game, or you want to move on to the desert?
All set.
All set here.
All right, Pelicans at the Suns. Some big news we're waiting on. Deandre Ayton is listed questionable with a leg injury.
Yep.
I think the FTN community is on board with this, that I think he's going to sit. We saw, I forget who posted the tweet of Ayton not participating in shoot around, but he wasn't dressed out and he was throwing entry passes into post drills. So I think he's probably going to sit this one out, which would open up Javel Mcgee at 3.4K. Obviously some other potential front court value there with a guy like Jalen Smith, or maybe Frank Kaminsky, gets back into the rotation tonight. But Joe, talk to me about your targets here for the Phoenix Suns.
It starts and ends with Javel Mcgee if DeAndre Ayton's out. 3-4. Javel McGee's never going to be, a 28 to 30 minute player. He never has been. He never will be. But he doesn't need that with his per minute production. Like you throw him in a game against the Pelicans, who are very, they're received defensively. But I do think that a center like Jovel, who might not be like the greatest defensive center in the world, but he has a lot of size. Yeah. It could be just like, Javel McGee's uncoordinated ass just running into a brick wall. You never know. But the thing is, like 3-4, he plays 21 minutes. You don't need anything more than that, because like Andre Drummond did last night in the first quarter, Javel McGee's fully capable of doing the same thing. So it's really, really hard. I'm building as if Ayton's out. Like I have, if I'm not going to give my lineup away, but like my guard, forward, and utility spot right now is Donovan Mitchell, Anthony Davis, Javel McGee. I chose to find players who play later specifically so I can rework if Ayton's in. If Ayton's in, I don't have any interest in him. I really don't. I would actually not mind Jovel if Ayton's in. I would prefer that rather than if McGee's in at the starting lineup. But I think Ayton being out helps Devin Booker more than Chris Paul, simply because Chris Paul is still the key facilitator, and it's really Ayton and Booker who are splitting the production from that facilitation. But I'm not rushing to play either of those guards.
Kind of an interesting decision between JaVale McGee and Dwight Powell over there on Superdraft. Dwight Powell 1.75x, JaVale McGee 1.8x. Two of the better high multiplier values over there that both only center eligible to my knowledge. So you're going to have to make a choice between the two. Kyle,
you should know that for sure, right?
You would think, but I've got about 18 windows up in front of me. So I'll check and I'll get back to you after Kyle talks about the Sun.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, so I do think there's a little bit of an interesting thing, obviously, with the late news, or I guess expected late news with this game starting a little bit later, is JaVale McGee's ownership probably won't be as high if we would have, let's say, got that 8 news at noon. The ownership would, without a doubt, be higher on McGee. And with that being the case for McGee, like, he's never going to, in my opinion, he's never going to play like 30 minutes. Like Joe mentioned, 21 minutes, and that's probably all you need. But when you're talking about a guy who could potentially play 20 minutes and be, 30, 40, 50, whatever it was going to be or could have been, that's always like a spot where you could potentially think about fading there, especially since we do have some pivots on the slate. Now we're at a spot where he's probably going to be 15, 20% maybe if the slate locks and then the news comes out. On DraftKings, I have him at about 10 right now. I'm trying to kind of middle right now. Like I put Ayton at 25 minutes, and then I put McGee at 18 minutes just to see where these guys would be popping based on those kinds of roles. But obviously, we'll get more clarity once we get the news. I really like Devin Booker. I think he's one of the plays on the slate that are going a bit overlooked. Obviously, a guy who can definitely get hot and have a massive ceiling game. And I think it could potentially be a good spot to not necessarily get a leverage play off of off of McGee if he becomes chalk, but I just think Booker is just not being looked at enough because we're looking at other places within this game. So Booker and McGee, if he is starting with Ayton out, would be pretty much the only real spots of interest I have. Chris Paul is being projected as a fairly popular play tonight, 25% on Fanduel, 22% on DraftKings. I don't hate it. I don't know if I necessarily love it for the ownership. I do think it's obviously a pretty strong play most nights because he's a really good basketball player and he's pretty solid for fantasy. But at the ownership, I don't know if he's necessarily a must play for me. And then the last guy I want to touch on from an ownership perspective is Jay Crowder, 4,200 on FanDuel. He's projecting as a solid value play, but 25% projected ownership on FanDuel right now. I'll probably pass on that. Very similar to Covington from last night, where we don't necessarily hate Covington if he's not going to be owned because he has ceiling to rack up, 3-4 stocks. And I think Crowder's very similar, but if he's going to be very popular, I'll just fade and hope that variance is in my favor that night.
That makes sense to me. And on DraftKings specifically, you've got Chris Paul sitting there $400 cheaper than Devin Booker. I slightly prefer him tonight. Chris Paul, 19. I think this number comes down, but 19 potential assists per game so far this season. That's absolutely massive, especially with a team with so many knockdown shooters around him. So no issue with the Booker play, though. He got a solid 8 in the rankings. Kyle, let's flip to the other side of this game because Zion Williamson obviously remains out. Looks like 2 to 3 weeks before he gets back in action for the Pelicans. Brandon Ingram still listed doubtful, I think. I would be surprised if he plays. And the rest of this roster seems good to go. So we've got Javel up top, obviously, in his expanded role with this New Orleans team. Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Devontae Graham going to pick up some sizable chunks of usage with Ingram out. And then you've got Josh Hart still at 4.9K. I think he looks like a great play as well. So what are you targeting from the Pelicans team?
So I think obviously, like you mentioned with Ingram out, there's several different places you can look in this game. Jovel is my favorite Pelican of the day. I think he's a really strong play. And, I did mention the whole regression idea earlier on in the show where if a guy's been playing really well and, he's probably bound to regress, that's a spot where you could look to fade. But I don't think that's the case for Jovel. He's always been very good at producing per minute. The minutes just haven't really been there like they have been this year in the past. I believe I was looking last night, so I don't know if this is exactly correct, but 32 or more minutes in all but 2 games so far this year, I believe. So big minutes for Jovel. And with him being the kind of producer that he has been, over 1.3 fantasy points per minute on both sites over the last year and a half, very, very good per minute producer. So with him getting 32 plus minutes every night, it's going to be tough for him not to have some solid production. I love Nickeil Alexander-Walker tonight. The price I don't think is amazing, but I think that's going to keep the ownership down, especially on DraftKings. I'm at 5% projected ownership with that 6-7 price tag. I think Devontae Graham's fine, but I do prefer Nickeil Alexander-Walker, especially on Fanduel where he's $700 cheaper. And then on DraftKings, it's only $300 difference to get to Alexander Walker, and he's going to be about a fraction of the ownership, 5% compared to 14 for Graham. Zach, you talked about Hart quite a bit tonight. I think he's a strong play. And then Herb Jones, that guy's been playing a ton of minutes, rookie out of Alabama. I don't hate going there either at 3,500. We haven't really seen him produce a ton. Like he has, I think he had 2 games in double digits, I believe. Mm-hmm. But other than that, like we haven't seen him really flourish in terms of being able to put up a ton of stats or anything like that. But I mean, hey, I have him at 30 minutes tonight. If he's going to play a ton of minutes, you could do worse.
Yeah, man. I mean, the thing about Herb is like the 36 minutes is a completely different story from what we've seen the rest of the beginning of this season. Like that's a whole nother level. And at 3.5, it's hard for me. It would be hard for me to build 20 lineups and not have any exposure to Herb Jones at 3.5. Joe, are you kind of in lockstep with us here, or are you looking at the Pelicans differently?
So I like Javel a lot. If you guys are betting and his rebounds are still sitting at 12.5, I love the over there.
I did get in on that.
My struggle with Javel right now is just how many centers there are on the slate. I'll keep coming back to that. It feels like a cop-out, but I can't prioritize him given the other options, especially if I'm spending up that much. I just want to get Anthony Davis, so I'm all over Anthony Davis in the slate. Josh Hart on DraftKings is my favorite Pelican play under 5K. I think he's a really good play on FanDuel at 5.5, but I do think he's a stronger play on DraftKings, whereas on FanDuel, if you're already in that $500 to $600 range, I'd rather just find the $600 and get up to NAW at 6.1, who has shooting guard and small forward eligibility over Josh Hart. So on FanDuel, I would prioritize them NAW, Josh Hart, Javel. On DraftKings, I would prioritize them Hart, NAW, Javel. I don't mind Devontae Graham here too. I just get a little worried about paying 6.4 for Devontae Graham, who can bottom out and shoot 1 of 15, which we've seen him do this season.
Yeah, we saw that 2 for 14 game back on the 23rd against Minnesota. Bounced back 2 nights later against that same Minnesota team, 8 for 16. I mean, it's just for me with Devontae Graham, it's just the shot volume is what keeps him in play at that price. It never feels great to roster him at 6.4. But with Ingram out, I think he's, if you're running multiple lineups, he's got to be considered. Anything else from this Pelicans and Suns game for you guys, or are we good to move on to the hammer?
I just want.
We are. Kyle, go ahead.
Yeah, I do need to admit, I just built a FanDuel lineup with Jay Crowder. I'm trying. I'm trying to fix it right now, but I just wanted to be clear about that I just admitted I wanted to fade him, but I mean he makes everything work, so I'm trying to wiggle around.
Hey man, the transparency is always appreciated, I believe, by all the subs and certainly by me. That is always important. So as we swap places on the screen randomly in the middle of the show, we will swap our focus to the Rockets and the Lakers closing out this 5-game slate. Back-to-back, really, with 1 day in between, but these two teams played in LA on Sunday evening. We'll start with the Lakers, and as always, it's their 3 All-Stars up top. LeBron sitting at 10-2 on DK, Russell Westbrook 9-9, Anthony Davis, power forward center eligible at 9-7. Joe, you said you had a lot of love for the Brow tonight, so talk to me about the Lakers.
The Brow's Max Metz's play of the day, so he's rolling right now. I don't know if this is going to be another situation with the Jayshawn Tate. I don't really want to resurface that. It's been his one miss, and he got grounded appropriately. But I love Anthony Davis. People are gonna box score watch and see his underwhelming performance in 32 minutes last game against the same Rockets team. He had 16 points, 14 rebounds, shot 7 of 17 from the field. He's benched, the volume's there, the rebounds are there. Houston gets killed by centers. His efficiency wasn't there, and we've seen his efficiency come around. He is one of, I'd say, 3 players on the slate with legitimate 80 fantasy point upside, and he's coming in significantly cheaper than the other 2. I don't think ownership will be here with LeBron expected to be back. And again, I'm not the way to beat Houston. You just play competent basketball and you beat Houston. But the way to throttle Houston is just in the paint. Like, they can't stop centers, and I think Anthony Davis again is the answer. And again, LeBron, I say this all the time, has continued to be persistent about the offense running through Anthony Davis. So because of his price, I have a hard time just not using him as a leverage play off of all those other chalky power forwards and centers. So just dropping one of those, which the one I'm dropping right now is Bobby Portis, which I'm fine with, and throwing Anthony Davis in there.
Kyle, any different way to attack these, I guess, elite Lakers guys up top?
No, I'm pretty much in lockstep there. I do like Anthony Davis the most out of all of them, especially because he helped with that flexibility of the Javel Mcgee situation. So I think that's a really good call. And then on Fanduel, you can play in power forward and center, and then you can also kind of move other players around as well. You can like play Giannis at small forward, so that's super helpful in terms of getting Davis in there. So yeah, AD is definitely my favorite player. I actually like Kent Bazemore a little bit as well on Fanduel, 4K flat. Like I just made a swap to get off of Crowder, but it was playing Bazemore. They're both kind of guys I don't necessarily love playing, but Bazemore shouldn't be too popular. Well, I just think Crowder's going to get up there into his ownership. So Bazemore's fine if you're looking for a value piece. But on the other side of this game, Kevin Porter Jr., I don't know if we kind of talked about this game, but I guess I'll just segue into it if we haven't. Kevin Porter Jr. is one of my favorite plays of the night. I'll have a ton of Kevin Porter Jr. on both sites. Especially Fanduel, you can play on point guard and small forward. So really like KPJ, and he pairs up nicely as like a mini correlation there with AD.
Yeah, man, let's just go ahead and dive into that Houston side, and then we can kind of dovetail between the two teams in terms of the value. Christian Wood up top, obviously. Kevin Porter Jr., as Kyle mentioned, priced really nicely, I think just kind of across the industry today. 1.5x on Superdraft, 6.2K on DraftKings. I think his numbers have been held down by a couple blowouts, some foul trouble, and ankle injury. I still think this guy just, in these games that don't even necessarily have to be super close, but at least competitive, right? Less than a 25-point margin, say. Like KPJ is getting 35, 36 minutes a night, and at this price, I really like that. So, Joe, what are you looking at on this Houston side?
KPJ for me. I think people now understand that rostering KPJ is going to be a roller coaster all season simply because of how he plays. He's a turnover-prone individual, but that ceiling is massive. We haven't seen that ceiling game yet, and he just succeeded against this Lakers team. He likes to get to the rim. The Lakers struggle at the rim. My only concern with the rim protection is that if Dwight Howard doesn't play, we see Anthony Davis play more 5, which just caters to my love for him more. But KPJ's price is far from indicative of his production and ceiling. Kyle, I might have blanked if you gave his ownership on FanDuel. I expect him to be pretty popular. I haven't looked at what you have him at right now.
I got him at 23%, so I don't think that's a bad number. I think it should be higher.
So that's actually, I think that's lower than I would. I would be over the field if I were MMEing. I don't mind Jalen Green, but he's just very, very scoring dependent right now, and his efficiency just isn't there. So I'm okay passing on Jalen Green and just rostering KPJ. I also don't mind Christian Wood because the Lakers have really struggled with production in the paint this year.
Kyle, looking down the roster, I know you talked about KPJ. Jalen Green's probably going to get out there and shoot more than the 8 times he did last game. He's priced right below KPJ on DraftKings. Then you've got a guy like Eric Gordon. We didn't really touch on the Rockets injury report. Daniel House out, Jayshawn Tate questionable, Daniel Tice questionable. I think Eric Gordon's a guy who could pick up some significant time here, and at 4.9, if that happens, guard forward eligible, I would have a lot of interest. And then obviously if Tice sits, Alperen Şengün would get an uptick in minutes to deal with this Lakers front court. How do you like some of these values from the Rockets?
I think Green's pretty interesting. I do like Porter more, but like if you are building a fairly chalky lineup and you don't want to roll with Porter, you can just drop down a little bit to Green and kind of make that pivot there. On DraftKings, I wouldn't worry about Porter's ownership too much. I have him at about 13%. But on FanDuel, I could see Porter getting a bit higher than where I have him at right now. But overall, I just think he's a really strong play for Green and Porter. But you mentioned if Tice is out, Şengün being a bump there. I think this has been a guy who's been good on a permanent basis. So the price is kind of to a point where he's not a mega value, but I think we're going to see 1% projected ownership on them, even if Tice is ruled out. I have him at about 1 right now, so I'm sure he'd go up a little bit, but I don't know if that's a a huge movement that would kind of be caught by a ton of people. And I already have him at about 18.5 minutes. So I wouldn't recommend playing him at that rate, but if Tice is out, then I do think he gets a nice bump there.
Joe, Houston values. I think we could throw a guy like David Nwaba into the conversation, especially if some of those guys are out, at least on a showdown slate. And then, some of these other Lakers guys, Carmelo Anthony, been playing a little bit above his head, in my opinion, so far in his stint with the Lakers. Kent Bazemore, obviously, there. And then we've got Dwight Howard still questionable with that neck stiffness. So I think, a DeAndre Jordan play could be interesting as a value, or especially on the showdown. So talk to me about some of these values from the Hammer.
It's Alperen Sengun for me. That's the play. Even if Daniel Tice is active, I really think that this increase in minutes is here to stay. I see him getting probably 20 to 21 minutes, even if Tice is active, which I think, with his efficiency and what he's shown this year, I think that's fine. And it's a great way to differentiate. Like Kyle said, if you have a chalky lineup, especially with these bigs, swapping one of like a Powell or a Javel out and getting, or a Portis out and getting up to Sengun is a very easy way to differentiate one piece, which is going to be more than enough if he outperforms him to leapfrog the field. I don't mind David Nwaba. I don't want to talk about Jayshawn Tate. I consider Kevin Porter Jr. a value on this team, so he's still my favorite play. That's where I lean with Houston.
Anything else from this game? We've got about 5 minutes left, or do you just want to head to questions / news?
We can head to questions. The big question that we missed while you were talking, Bucks lineup came out. Thanasis is starting again. Does that change anything for you? For me, I think your point about Semi Ojeleye being back does worry me a bit, especially like, again, I will continue to preach that it's not going to be a 1-for-1 with, as Bobby Portis' minutes go up, Thanasis go down. They will take some away from Thanasis. So you then mix in two players to take minutes away from Thanasis. Jordan Nwora is still going to get playing time because they need offense. I don't necessarily know if we have 30 minutes out of Thanasis on this slate.
Yeah, I don't either. I just think, like I said before, I think the minutes are just going to get pulled away from him as they have more, and I could heap some praises on Thanasis, but in comparison to a guy like Bobby Portis or even Semi Ojeleye, those guys are more NBA ready or NBA caliber players compared to the brother Antetokounmpo there. So yeah. I'll head to the Discord here, as we did get also the Pistons lineup: Killian Hayes, Cade Cunningham, Sadiq Bey, Jeremy Grant, and Beef Stew. Couple questions here, tagging the experts. A 3v3 here from my guy Steelers fan: Bam, George Hill, Herb Jones, or Dwight Powell, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, and Grayson Allen. Kyle, which one would you prefer there?
Second one for me.
Joe?
Second one, agreed.
Woolsey's asking us Portis over Carmelo Anthony in cash. Joe?
I don't love either of them in cash, but I would prefer Portis in cash. I'm actually kind of backing off of Portis a little bit on this slate, just because of that other value.
I think in cash, I'd also be with you, just slightly favoring Portis and using the savings elsewhere. Kyle, what's your take?
Portis for me.
Okay, we've got AD or JVal, closer in price than you might think. Certainly 2 weeks ago when the season started, but still some savings there with JVal. Kyle, which one would you prefer?
If price doesn't matter, like if you can't upgrade, I know it's not as big of a price dip as it was early in the year, but if you can't upgrade, I would prefer AD.
Joe, I saw you already answered AD, so I'll ask you, JoVal or Gobert, much closer in price?
Ooh. I actually think JoVal has a higher ceiling on this slate, so I'm going to go JoVal.
Kyle?
JoVal slightly for me, but I do like Gobert a pretty good amount.
So do I.
We've got a super draft question here, so I'll go ahead and stick this one. Christian Wood or Jimmy if I already have Bam on super draft? And, I mean, with the chance of, by the way, Jimmy 1.2x, Christian Wood 1.25x over there, I think I'm going to go with Christian Wood. If Daniel Tice sits, I think that's going to just solidify Christian Wood's minutes, which should be in the 35 to 37-minute range, in my opinion, over there. So I'll diversify my exposure and not stack Jimmy and Bam Although I don't think that's out of the question if you're running multiple lineups. Scraping the bottom of the barrel here, Kyle. Thanasis or Frank Ntilikina? Frankie Smokes, who's in Dallas now.
Thanasis for me.
Joe.
Thanasis as well. It would take a lot for me to play Frankie Smokes on any DFS, like a lot.
It would take a lot for me to play either of those guys tonight. But Joe, we'll stick with you here since you're up in that neck of the woods. How many bucks is the right number of bucks tonight? We'll say
however many end on DraftKings. The right number is going to be however many end up in the optimal lineup. I don't know what it's going to be, but I have 2 in my single entry right now. I have Giannis and George Hill, but I think you can get away with 3. I don't think I would go more than 3.
I'll give you credit, Herm. Funny answer there in the chat. I think the answer is definitely not 0. I would not want to run no bucks in my lineup tonight. But Kyle, do you have a specific number for us?
I would say 2 is a sweet spot.
Okay, sounds pretty sweet to me. I think we're out of questions. So everybody, I know we're getting down to it here, about 35 seconds. But any questions that pop up now, we'll go ahead and type the answers in the chat to try to avoid the little stream delay that we have. I think it's about 15 or 20 seconds typically. Let's see, fellas. Which of these 5 games are you? Oh, that's a stupid question. Take the first game out. Which of the 4 remaining games are you most excited to watch tonight?
You're funny. The other games are ugly. Probably Miami and Dallas.
Kyle?
Yeah, I think Miami and Dallas will be the best one. But for my lineup sake, which is typically where I have the most interest anyway, I'll say Sacramento and Utah.
Yeah, I think I'm going to stick with the Miami-Dallas game as well. As Cowboys keep winning, so we got to have some way to knock these Dallas fans down a peg here in Texas. Well, that is lock and right on time. The Heat giving their starting lineup. Kyle Lowry, Duncan Robinson, Jimmy Butler, PJ Tucker, Bam Adebayo, so no surprises there. We'll take a quick spin through ownership unless either of you guys have to run out of here in the next 60 seconds. We won't stick around long because I know that we've got some basketball to watch, especially you two with your 2 teams kicking off. It's football season, so tipping off in about 8 minutes. So I'm pulling up, man, fellas. Joe, Kyle, I know I told you about my new laptop. Joe, I know I told you about my new laptop. What? The ownership already on my screen. We are moving up in the world, boys. You
got a new laptop, no more dial-up for Kyle. We're living right now.
I know, man. So, a lot of ownership here in this first game.
Yep.
Let's say Kyle, ownership master here at FTN. Who is the highest owned player from Milwaukee and Detroit?
Well, I think that's actually probably closer than some would have thought. I mean, I think it is Giannis. But I think there might be a couple names that are close behind.
Any guess, or you just middling it there?
No, I'm gonna say Cade's more popular.
Cade number 1.
Cade is number 1. Yeah.
Then Giannis has to be number 2.
Giannis is number 2. Good job, fellas. Joe, give me your guess on Cade's ownership, and Kyle, give me your guess on Giannis's ownership. Go first, Joe.
Oh, Cade! I feel like Cade got up there. 55. That's really high. That's really high, but I'm gonna go with it.
Yeah, try 60.
Wow.
Again, this is the $15 GPP.
That's really high. That is really high. That might be the highest owned player on a 5-game slate or more this season.
Yeah. I mean, off the top of my head, we haven't had a ton of 5-game slates, or at least it feels like we've had between 8 and 10 most days through the first 2 weeks. All right, Giannis, your guess, Kyle.
I'm going to say 35.
Yeah, 49.4.
Wow.
I was not kidding when I said a ton of ownership in this game. So we'll get guesses from each of you on the third place guy here, and then we'll get out of here. Who is third in the ownership?
I think it's starting lineups. I think probably, George Hill.
George Hill, number 4. Kyle.
I'm going to say Thanasis.
Thanasis Antetokounmpo, number 3. Give me your ownership guess, Kyle.
32.
42.
Oh, that's a big number.
Wow. Oh my God. I'm
We
so
love
mad
to
to
see
admit it. Wow.
I noticed on a couple other sites they weren't accounting for Semi Ojeleye being back tonight, so maybe that bumped up Thanasis' ownership to that. What I think is a ridiculous level. Maybe I'll be eating those words in an hour, and we're sitting at halftime, and Thanasis has 16 DK points or something like that. But I think you got to feel pretty good if you are well under that number. George Hill, I mentioned, is at 4. He's 35%. Grayson Allen, 21%. Bobby Portis up to 20%. Kelly O, 12%. And then we're into the single digits with Pat Connaughton, Jeremy Grant, Jordan Nwora holding 7% alongside Sadiq Bey, Josh Jackson, 3.5%. Trey Lyles, 1.3%. Killian Hayes, beef stew, sub 1%. So not crazy. If you were to run a share of those guys, you would get over the field. That's about it. One of our favorites from the other night, Hamidou Diallo, 0.07 after a big letdown. I believe that was Sunday. Well, all right, fellas. I'll let you guys get out of here. Go watch some NBA basketball. It's
Watch
waiver
Kate
night.
Cunningham. It is waiver night.
And guess what? It's also podcast night. We will be having our first listener league interview. And I won't give away who it is, but I'll give you a hint. We'll have some bean rankings on the pod when that gets posted.
I thought you said you weren't going to give away who it is.
Didn't give it away at all.
It could be. That's a good point. Nobody else talking about beans that much. Although there are like 3 different teams with bean nicknames in the league. Regardless.
Funny story.
Yeah.
Funny story, actually. So I moved into the new condo place and setting up the Wi-Fi today, actually, and looking through all the active networks around here. The first one that I see is Bean Network. Like that can't be a coincidence. Like someone is, been placed into my simulation and did that just for me. So,
yeah. Our buddy who we're alluding to dropped a nice picture of a box of Band-Aids filled with baked beans today. So that was part of my morning. All right, enough of this silliness. Everybody, good luck. We appreciate you, as always, tuning in to this edition of the Dream Stream. For Kyle, for Joe, I'm Zach. Shout out Thomas, our producer extraordinaire, behind the glass. We'll be in Discord all night till that last game locks, and then we'll show up for beans after the slate is over. We'll see you guys next time. Good luck. Goodbye.